The morning sun cast long shadows across the rocky terrain of the Afghan mountains as Lieutenant Sarah Chun adjusted her rifle scope for the third time. The SEAL Team 6 reconnaissance mission had started like any other, but the intelligence reports felt different this time. Too clean, too convenient. She kept those thoughts to herself as she followed her team leader, Commander Jake Morrison, through the narrow mountain pass. Sarah had earned her place on the team through sheer determination and exceptional marksmanship. Growing up in a military family in Texas, she had been shooting since she could hold a rifle. Her father, a Marine sniper, had taught her that patience and precision were more valuable than speed and aggression. Those lessons had carried her through BUD/S training, where she became one of only 3 women to complete the program that year. The mission briefing had been straightforward. Intelligence indicated that a high-value target, Taliban commander Rashid Hakim, was operating from a compound in the remote Kunar province. The compound sat in a valley surrounded by steep mountains, making it nearly impossible to approach undetected. Airstrikes were not an option due to the presence of civilians in nearby villages. The SEALs would have to get close, gather intelligence, and call in a surgical strike if the target was confirmed. The 8-person team moved carefully through the terrain. Besides Sarah and Commander Morrison, the team included demolitions expert Petty Officer Luis Rodriguez, communications specialist Petty Officer Mike Thompson, medic chief Petty Officer Amanda Walsh, and 3 other seasoned operators. Each member had been handpicked for this mission based on their specific skills and combat experience. As they reached the observation point overlooking the target compound, Sarah felt the familiar calm that came before action. Through her scope, she could see the layout clearly. The compound consisted of 3 main buildings arranged around a central courtyard. Armed guards patrolled the perimeter, and several vehicles were parked near the main entrance. The intelligence had been accurate about the location, but something about the guard patterns bothered her. "Overwatch, this is ground team." Morrison spoke quietly into his radio. "We have eyes on target." Confirming layout matches intelligence reports. Sarah continued scanning the compound through her scope, counting guards, and noting their weapons. Most carried AK-47s, standard for Taliban fighters, but she noticed something unusual. Several guards had newer equipment, including tactical vests and what appeared to be night vision goggles hanging from their gear. This level of equipment was uncommon for typical Taliban operations. "Commander," Sarah whispered, "the guards have better gear than expected. This might be more than a standard compound." Morrison nodded, studying the scene through his binoculars. "Rodriguez, what do you make of those vehicles?" The demolitions expert focused his attention on the parked vehicles. 2 pickup trucks, 1 SUV, and what looks like a modified truck with heavy armor plating. Someone invested serious money in this operation. As the team settled into their observation positions, Sarah established her sniper nest behind a cluster of rocks that provided both concealment and a clear field of fire. Her rifle, a customized MK-13 Mod 7, was perfectly zeroed for the 800-meter distance to the compound. She had painted small marks on the scope to account for wind and elevation at this specific range. Hours passed as they gathered intelligence. Sarah maintained her position, occasionally shifting slightly to prevent muscle fatigue while keeping her eyes on the compound. She had learned early in her career that patience was a sniper's greatest asset. Many missions were won or lost based on the ability to wait for the perfect moment. As afternoon approached, increased activity began around the compound. More vehicles arrived, and Sarah counted at least 15 additional fighters entering the main building. Through her scope, she could see some of these new arrivals wore different clothing and carried more sophisticated weapons. "We might have stumbled onto something bigger than a single target," Morrison observed quietly. Communications specialist Thompson had been monitoring radio chatter throughout the day. "Commander, I'm picking up increased radio traffic in the area. Multiple frequencies, some encrypted. This is definitely more than a standard Taliban operation." Sarah continued her methodical observation, cataloging every detail. She noticed that the guards changed positions every 30 minutes in a precise pattern. The discipline suggested military training beyond typical insurgent groups. Her concern grew as she realized they might be walking into a trap. "Commander, guard rotations are too precise. Someone with military training organized this security," she reported. Morrison studied the compound again. "Walsh, what's your assessment?" The team medic had been watching for signs of civilian presence. No women or children visible. No typical village activities. This looks like a pure military operation. As the sun began to set, Sarah noticed something that made her blood run cold. One of the guards was using hand signals to communicate with another guard on the opposite side of the compound. The signals were not Taliban standard. They were military tactical signals used by Special Operations Forces. "Commander, we have a problem," Sarah whispered urgently. "The guards are using Spec Ops hand signals. This is not a typical Taliban compound." Before Morrison could respond, Thompson's voice crackled through their communications. "Multiple vehicles approaching from the south. Looks like a convoy." Sarah swung her scope toward the approaching dust cloud. Through the fading light, she could see a convoy of 6 vehicles moving quickly toward their position. Her heart rate increased as she realized the vehicles were heading directly toward the mountain pass they had used to reach their observation point. "Commander, that convoy is moving to block our exit route," she reported. Morrison quickly assessed their situation. They were positioned on high ground with good defensive positions, but if the convoy reached the pass, they would be trapped in the mountains with limited escape routes. "All teams, prepare for possible contact," Morrison ordered. "We may have walked into a setup." Sarah adjusted her position slightly, ensuring she had clear fields of fire toward both the compound and the approaching convoy. Her training kicked in automatically as she began calculating ranges and wind conditions for multiple potential targets. The first vehicle in the convoy stopped at the base of the mountain pass, and armed fighters began dismounting. Through her scope, Sarah could see they carried modern assault rifles and moved with military precision. These were not typical Taliban fighters. "Definitely Spec Ops trained," she reported. Equipment and movement patterns suggest foreign training, possibly Pakistani ISI or other state sponsors. Thompson continued monitoring radio communications. "Commander, they're coordinating a sweep of our area. Someone knows we're here." Morrison made a quick decision. "Prepare to move to secondary observation point. We need to get out of this kill box." But as the team began preparing to move, Sarah spotted movement from the compound. Additional fighters were moving out to establish positions that would cut off their alternate escape routes. "Movement from compound," she reported. "They're positioning to block our secondary routes." The situation was deteriorating rapidly. What had started as a routine reconnaissance mission was becoming a coordinated trap. Sarah maintained her position, ready to provide covering fire if the team needed to fight their way out. Through her scope, she watched as the fighters from the convoy began moving up the mountain in a coordinated sweep pattern. Their movement was too organized, too precise for untrained insurgents. Someone had provided them with detailed intelligence about SEAL tactics and procedures. "Commander, this feels like a deliberate ambush," Rodriguez observed. "Someone wanted us here." Morrison was already thinking ahead to their next moves. "Walsh, plot alternate extraction points. Thompson, try to raise headquarters and report our situation." Sarah continued watching both the compound and the advancing fighters. In her scope, she could see individual faces clearly. Most were young men, probably in their 20s, but their eyes held the hardness of experienced fighters. Several had facial hair and clothing that suggested they were foreign fighters, possibly from Pakistan or other neighboring countries. The lead elements of the convoy fighters reached a position about 600 meters below their observation point. Sarah could take several shots at that range, but engaging would reveal their exact position and bring the full force of the enemy down on their location. "I have clear shots on the lead elements," she reported quietly, "but engagement will compromise our position." Morrison was weighing their options when Thompson received an urgent radio message. "Commander, headquarters reports no friendly forces in this area. We're on our own." The realization hit the team that they were completely isolated. No backup was coming, and they were facing a superior force that seemed to know their exact location and tactics. Sarah noticed something else that increased her concern. Several fighters were carrying what appeared to be surface-to-air missile launchers. If they needed helicopter extraction, those weapons could make it impossible. "Sam, launchers visible," she reported. "Air extraction may not be viable." As darkness began falling, the enemy fighters lit flares to illuminate the mountainside. The tactical situation was becoming desperate. The SEALs were outnumbered, surrounded, and facing an enemy that seemed prepared for their specific capabilities. Morrison gathered his team for a quick tactical discussion. "We have 3 options. Fight our way out, try to evade and escape, or find a defensive position and call for extraction." Sarah studied the terrain through her night vision scope. "There's a ridge line to the east that provides good defensive positions and multiple escape routes. But we'd have to cross open ground to reach it." Rodriguez examined their ammunition supplies. "We have enough for a sustained firefight, but not enough to fight our way through a force this size." Walsh checked her medical supplies, while Thompson continued trying to establish communication with headquarters. The enemy was clearly in no hurry. They were methodically establishing positions to ensure the SEALs could not escape. Sarah watched through her scope as fighters set up heavy machine guns and what appeared to be mortar positions. "They're setting up for a siege," she observed, "planning to wear us down rather than assault our position." Morrison made his decision. "We move to the east ridge at dawn. Sarah, you'll provide overwatch and cover our movement." As the night progressed, Sarah maintained her watch while the rest of the team prepared for the morning movement. Through her night vision scope, she could see enemy sentries maintaining their positions. The discipline and patience they displayed confirmed these were well-trained fighters, not typical insurgents. Around midnight, she noticed increased activity in the compound. Additional vehicles arrived, and more fighters moved into positions. Someone was coordinating a major operation, and the SEALs were clearly the primary target. "Commander, significant reinforcement of enemy positions. They're committing serious resources to this operation," she reported. Morrison acknowledged the report while continuing to plan their escape. The situation required careful timing and precise execution. One mistake could result in the entire team being captured or killed. Sarah spent the pre-dawn hours studying the terrain and enemy positions through her scope. She identified key targets that would need to be eliminated to give her team the best chance of reaching the ridgeline. Her shooting positions were carefully planned to provide maximum effectiveness while maintaining her own security. As the first light of dawn appeared over the mountains, the true scope of their situation became clear. Enemy fighters had established a complete perimeter around their position, with overlapping fields of fire and multiple defensive positions. The SEALs were completely surrounded, facing a superior force in terrain that favored the enemy. Their survival would depend on Sarah's ability to eliminate key threats while the team moved to a more defensible position. Sarah checked her rifle one final time, ensuring every component was functioning perfectly. The coming day would test every skill she had learned throughout her military career. Her teammates' lives depended on her precision and judgment. The stage was set for a desperate fight for survival in the unforgiving mountains of Afghanistan. Dawn broke with crystal clarity over the Afghan mountains, and Sarah Chun could see the full extent of their predicament through her rifle scope. Enemy fighters had established positions in a complete circle around their location, with approximately 60 combatants visible from her vantage point. The morning light revealed prepared fighting positions, sandbags, and heavy weapons that confirmed this was a carefully planned ambush. Commander Morrison crouched beside Sarah's position, studying the enemy deployment through his binoculars. "How many do you count?" Sarah continued her methodical scan. 63 confirmed, probably more I can't see from this angle. Heavy machine gun positions at 200 and 400 meters southeast. Mortar team at 300 meters due south. Sniper team on the ridge at 600 meters northeast. The most concerning element was the enemy sniper team. Sarah had spotted them using the muzzle flash suppressor glinting in the morning sun. Their position commanded an excellent view of the entire area, making movement extremely dangerous for her team. Priority target is that sniper team, Sarah continued. They can cover too much ground from that position. Morrison nodded. How long do you need to neutralize them? Sarah calculated the shot carefully. 600 meters uphill, with mountain wind patterns that were difficult to predict. The target was partially concealed behind rocks, presenting only occasional shooting opportunities. Give me 3 minutes to study the wind patterns, then I'll take the shot when he exposes himself. Rodriguez crawled over with their ammunition count. We have enough for a sustained engagement, but we need to make every shot count. Thompson had been monitoring enemy radio communications throughout the night. They're receiving orders from someone with military experience. Proper radio protocols, tactical terminology. This isn't a random Taliban operation. Sarah focused her attention on the enemy sniper position. Through her scope, she could see movement behind the rocks. The shooter was using a Soviet-era Dragunov sniper rifle, effective but not as precise as her American-made Mk-13. The advantage would be hers if she could get a clean shot. Walsh finished her assessment of their defensive position. We have good cover here, but limited escape routes. If they bring up mortars or RPGs, this position becomes a death trap. Morrison made his decision. We moved to the East Ridge in 15 minutes. Sarah neutralized that sniper team, then provide overwatch for a movement. Sarah settled into her shooting position, controlling her breathing and studying the wind indicators. Small dust movements and vegetation patterns told her the wind was shifting slightly from the southwest at approximately 8 miles per hour. She adjusted her scope accordingly. The enemy sniper made his mistake at exactly 0647 hours. He shifted position to get a better angle on the SEAL team, exposing his head and shoulders for approximately 3 seconds. Sarah's training took over automatically. Breath control, sight picture, trigger squeeze. The shot echoed across the mountains. Through her scope, Sarah watched the enemy sniper collapse behind his position. His spotter immediately ducked for cover, eliminating the immediate threat from that position. Target down, she reported calmly. The enemy response was immediate and intense. Multiple machine gun positions opened fire on their location, forcing the team to keep their heads down. Bullets struck the rocks around them, sending fragments flying in all directions. Morrison waited for a brief lull in the fire before giving the movement order. Move in 30 seconds. Sarah, cover our displacement. Sarah shifted to a position that gave her better fields of fire toward the enemy positions. As her teammates began their movement toward the East Ridge, she identified targets systematically. The key was to disrupt enemy fire rather than eliminate every fighter. A machine gun team 300 meters away was causing the most problems for her team's movement. Sarah aimed carefully at the gunner, compensating for the range and wind. Her second shot of the engagement found its mark, and the machine gun fell silent. The gun team's assistant immediately moved to take over the weapon. Sarah was ready. Her third shot eliminated the second gunner before he could bring the weapon back into action. Moving, Morrison's voice came through her earpiece as the team sprinted across open ground toward better cover. Enemy fighters adjusted their positions to maintain fire on the moving SEALs. Sarah identified a fighter with an RPG preparing to engage her team. The range was 400 meters, and the target was partially concealed behind a boulder. Sarah waited for him to expose himself to take a shot. When he raised the RPG launcher, she was ready. Her fourth shot struck him center mass, and the RPG round exploded harmlessly against the mountainside. The team reached the first waypoint, a cluster of rocks that provided temporary cover. Sarah could see they were still exposed to fire from multiple positions, but the movement had improved their tactical situation slightly. Overwatch moving, she reported, beginning her own displacement to maintain coverage of her team. As Sarah moved between positions, enemy fire intensified around her previous location. Bullets struck rocks where she had been lying just seconds before. The enemy had identified her position and was concentrating fire to eliminate the threat she represented. She reached her new firing position and immediately began engaging targets that threatened her team's next movement. A group of 5 fighters was moving to flank their position from the south. Sarah engaged the lead fighter at 350 meters, dropping him with her 5th shot. The remaining 4 fighters took cover, but Sarah had disrupted their flanking movement and bought her team precious time. Morrison's voice came through her earpiece. Next bound in 60 seconds. Sarah scanned for immediate threats. The enemy was beginning to coordinate their movements more effectively, with teams of fighters advancing undercover while others provided suppressive fire. A new machine gun position opened fire from 500 meters to the northwest. Sarah could see muzzle flashes from behind a low wall that provided the gunners excellent protection. She would need to wait for one of them to expose himself enough for a clear shot. The opportunity came when the gunner shifted position to track her team's movement. Sarah's 6th shot struck him in the upper torso, and the machine gun fire ceased immediately. "Moving now," Morrison called. Sarah watched her team sprint across another section of open ground while she engaged multiple targets to suppress enemy fire. Her 7th shot took down a fighter who was attempting to bring an RPG to bear on her team. As her team reached better cover near the base of the East Ridge, Sarah began her own movement. The distance to her next position was approximately 150 meters across terrain that offered minimal concealment. Enemy fire focused on her movement immediately. Bullets struck the ground around her feet as she sprinted between cover points. She reached a depression in the ground that provided temporary protection while she planned her next move. Through her scope, she could see that the enemy was repositioning to maintain pressure on the SEALs. New fighting positions were being established to cover the East Ridge, where her team was attempting to reach a more defensible location. Sarah's 8th shot eliminated a fighter who was setting up a machine gun in a position that would have made her team's continued movement impossible. The enemy commander was adapting to her effectiveness as a sniper. Sarah noticed that fighters were staying in covered positions longer and exposing themselves for shorter periods. This made targeting more difficult, but also reduced their effectiveness in engaging her team. Morrison's voice came through her earpiece with updated instructions. "Overwatch, we need you to neutralize the mortar team before they get range on our new position." Sarah located the mortar team through her scope. They were approximately 450 meters away, partially concealed behind sandbags and rocks. 3 fighters were operating what appeared to be an 82 millimeters mortar that could devastate her team's position if they established accurate fire. The mortar crew was preparing to fire their first ranging shot. Sarah could see them adjusting the elevation and direction of the weapon. She had only seconds before they would begin dropping rounds on her teammates. Sarah aimed at the gunner who was making final adjustments to the mortar. The shot was challenging due to the partial concealment and the critical timing required. Her 9th shot struck the gunner just as he was about to drop the first round down the mortar tube. The gunner collapsed across the mortar, and the round exploded in the tube, destroying the weapon and scattering the crew. Sarah's precision had eliminated one of the most serious threats to her team's survival. With the immediate mortar threat neutralized, Sarah focused on supporting her team's movement up the ridge. The terrain was steep and offered limited cover, making the SEALs vulnerable to observation and fire from multiple directions. An enemy fighter appeared on a rocky outcrop 600 meters away, carrying what looked like a radio. Sarah recognized him as likely being a forward observer or team leader coordinating the enemy assault. Eliminating him could disrupt their coordination. The shot required maximum precision at extended range with challenging wind conditions. Sarah took extra time to study the wind patterns and calculate the trajectory. Her 10th shot struck the target's center mass, and his radio fell silent. The effect was immediate. Enemy fire became less coordinated, and the tactical movements that had been increasing in sophistication became more random and less effective. Morrison's voice confirmed the team had reached a more defensible position halfway up the ridge. Overwatch, join us when you can. Good shooting. Sarah began planning her own movement to rejoin her team. The distance was approximately 300 meters across terrain that offered some concealment, but remained exposed to enemy observation from multiple directions. Before moving, she engaged 2 more targets that posed immediate threats to her planned route. Her 11th shot eliminated a fighter who had positioned himself to cover the exact path she needed to take. As Sarah prepared to move, she noticed increased activity around the original compound. Additional vehicles were arriving, and more fighters were dismounting. The enemy was reinforcing their operation, confirming that capturing or eliminating the SEAL team was a high-priority mission. Her 12th shot took down a fighter who was attempting to establish a new sniper position that would have threatened her movement route. Sarah began her movement toward her team's position, using every piece of available cover while maintaining awareness of threats from all directions. Enemy fire followed her movement, but remained largely ineffective due to the suppression she had achieved through her systematic targeting of key threats. Reaching her team's position after a demanding climb up the rocky slope, Sarah found them established in a natural defensive position among large boulders that provided excellent cover and clear fields of fire down the mountainside. Morrison briefed her on their situation. Good work neutralizing those key targets. We have a strong position here, but we're still surrounded. Enemy is regrouping and will probably try a coordinated assault. Sarah established a new sniper position that commanded excellent views of the approaches to their defensive position. Through her scope, she could see enemy fighters establishing new positions for what appeared to be a planned assault on their ridge position. The enemy had learned from their earlier mistakes. Movements were more cautious, and fighters were maintaining better concealment. Sarah would need to be patient and wait for clear shooting opportunities. Her 13th shot came when an enemy fighter exposed himself while attempting to signal other units. The 450-meter shot dropped him immediately, maintaining the psychological pressure on the enemy forces. As afternoon approached, Sarah had established a pattern of engaging any enemy fighter who exposed himself for more than a few seconds. Her precision shooting was disrupting enemy coordination and preventing them from mounting an effective assault on the SEAL team's position. The enemy commander appeared to be adjusting tactics again, focusing on containing the SEALs rather than attempting a direct assault. Sarah could see fighters establishing positions that would prevent escape while avoiding direct engagement with a rifle. Thompson had re-established communication with headquarters and was coordinating possible extraction options. The enemy's possession of surface-to-air missiles complicated helicopter extraction, requiring careful planning and coordination. Sarah continued her systematic engagement of targets, using her ammunition efficiently while maintaining maximum pressure on the enemy forces. Each shot was carefully planned to achieve maximum tactical effect, rather than simply eliminating individual fighters. The afternoon sun created challenging shooting conditions with heat shimmer affecting long-range visibility, but Sarah's training and experience allowed her to maintain effective engagement of targets throughout the day. As the second day of their siege situation continued, Sarah's rifle had become the primary factor preventing the enemy from overrunning their position. Her precision shooting had eliminated key leaders, disrupted communications, and maintained psychological pressure on a superior enemy force. The stage was set for the final phase of their desperate fight for survival. The third day dawned with an eerie silence that made Sarah Chen more nervous than the previous days of intense fighting. Through her rifle scope, she could see that enemy positions remained manned, but the fighters seemed to be waiting for something. The lack of probing attacks and sporadic gunfire suggested the enemy commander was planning something significant. Commander Morrison crawled to Sarah's position, carrying Thompson's radio equipment. Headquarters confirms extraction helicopters are en route, but they can't reach us until we eliminate those surface-to-air missile teams. Sarah had been tracking the SAM teams throughout the previous day. She had identified 3 positions with what appeared to be shoulder-fired missiles capable of threatening low-flying aircraft. The teams were well concealed and positioned to cover all possible helicopter approach routes. Two teams are at 700 and 800 meters southeast and southwest, Sarah reported. Third team is at 600 meters due south, but they're in a cave entrance. Difficult shot. Morrison studied the positions through his binoculars. How long do you need to neutralize all three? Sarah calculated carefully. Each shot would be at extreme range with challenging conditions. Once she engaged the first team, the others would take cover and become much more difficult targets. If I can get them to expose themselves simultaneously, maybe 10 minutes. But once I engage, they'll know exactly where the threat is coming from. Walsh had been monitoring radio chatter from the enemy positions. They're definitely waiting for something. Increased radio traffic in the last hour, but it's heavily encrypted. The answer came at 1030 hours when Sarah spotted dust clouds on the horizon through her scope. A convoy of vehicles was approaching from the north, and these were not typical Taliban trucks. Through her magnified optics, she could see military-style vehicles with heavy armor and what appeared to be a tank. "We have armor approaching from the north," Sarah reported. "Looks like a T-55 tank and several armored personnel carriers." The arrival of armor changed the tactical situation dramatically. The SEAL team's position, while excellent for defense against infantry, would be vulnerable to tank fire. The large boulders that provided cover from small arms would not stop tank rounds. Morrison immediately began planning their next movement. "We need to relocate before that armor gets into firing position. Sarah, can you slow them down?" Sarah studied the approaching convoy through her scope. The tank was approximately 1,200 meters away, at the maximum effective range of a rifle. She could not penetrate tank armor, but she might be able to eliminate the commander or disable vision blocks. "I can engage the tank commander if he exposes himself, but I can't stop the tank itself." Rodriguez had been preparing explosive charges throughout their defensive period. "If we can lure the tank closer, I might be able to disable it with improvised explosives." Sarah noticed movement from the SAM teams as the convoy approached. The missile teams were repositioning to cover the airspace above their location, preparing for the extraction helicopters they undoubtedly knew were coming. "SAM teams are moving. Now might be our best chance to engage them before the armor arrives." Morrison made the decision quickly. "Take the shot. We'll deal with the tank when it gets here." Sarah selected her first target, the SAM team at 700 meters to the southeast. The missile operator was partially visible behind rocks, with his launcher resting on a natural gun rest. This was the clearest shot available. Sarah controlled her breathing and squeezed the trigger smoothly. Her shot struck the missile operator center mass, and the expensive surface-to-air missile tumbled down the rocky slope. The second SAM team immediately took cover, but Sarah had anticipated this reaction. She shifted her aim to a position where she expected them to move for better concealment. When a missile operator moved to what he thought was a safer position, Sarah was ready. Her second shot eliminated the second SAM threat. The third team, positioned in the cave entrance, would be the most challenging. Sarah could only see shadows and occasional movement. She would have to wait for them to expose themselves or force them out somehow. The approaching tank had closed to 800 meters and was beginning to elevate its main gun toward the SEAL team's position. Sarah could see the tank commander standing in his cupola, directing the gunner toward their location. Sarah aimed carefully at the tank commander. The shot was at extreme range, and she would only get one opportunity before he dropped into the armored protection of the tank. Her rifle cracked, and through her scope, she watched the tank commander collapse into his cupola. The tank continued forward, but appeared to be operating without direct visual command. The main gun was no longer tracking toward their position with the same precision. Enemy infantry began advancing under cover of the tank, using its armor to shield their movement. Sarah could see approximately 20 fighters moving forward in tactical formation, preparing for a final assault on the SEAL position. Multiple infantry advancing with tank support, Sarah reported while engaging individual targets. Her next shot dropped an enemy fighter who was carrying an RPG, eliminating another threat to their position. The remaining fighters became more cautious in their advance, using whatever cover was available. Thompson's radio crackled with an urgent message from the incoming helicopters. Ground team, extraction birds are 15 minutes out. Need confirmation that SAM threats are neutralized. Sarah still had one SAM team unaccounted for in the cave position. The tank was now at 400 meters and beginning to search for targets with its main gun. Time was running out. Morrison made a crucial decision. Rodriguez prepared to engage that tank with explosives. Sarah, we need that last SAM team eliminated now. Sarah focused her attention on the cave entrance where the third missile team was concealed. She could see movement in the shadows, but no clear target. The cave provided excellent protection from a rifle. The solution came when she noticed a reflective surface in the cave that appeared to be the missile guidance system. Sarah aimed at the reflection and fired, hoping to damage the missile or force the operators to expose themselves. Her shot struck something metallic in the cave, and immediately two figures ran out of the entrance. Sarah's follow-up shot eliminated one of them before he could reach cover. The other fighter escaped, but without his missile system. All SAM threats neutralized, Sarah reported. The tank was now close enough for Rodriguez to attempt his explosive attack. He had prepared charges designed to damage the tank's tracks or vision blocks rather than penetrate its armor. Sarah provided covering fire as Rodriguez moved from cover to plant his explosives. Her shots forced enemy infantry to keep their heads down, preventing them from interfering with the demolition mission. The explosion rocked the mountainside as Rodriguez's charges detonated against the tank's left track. The tank lurched to a halt, unable to continue its advance. Without mobility, it became a less immediate threat to the SEAL team. Thompson received confirmation that the extraction helicopters were approaching the area. Birds inbound, 2 minutes to landing zone. The landing zone was approximately 200 meters from their current position, across open ground that was covered by enemy fire. The team would have to fight their way to extraction under intense fire. Sarah identified the key enemy positions that could interfere with their movement to the landing zone. 3 machine gun teams and approximately 15 riflemen were positioned to cover the open ground. "I'll suppress the machine gun positions," Sarah called out. "Move on my signal." Sarah began systematic engagement of the machine gun teams, forcing them to take cover and disrupting their fire. Her precision shots eliminated gunners faster than they could be replaced, creating gaps in enemy coverage. The sound of helicopter rotors filled the air as the extraction birds approached. Sarah could see them in the distance, flying low to avoid detection while approaching the landing zone. Morrison gave the movement order. "Go, go, go." The SEAL team sprinted toward the landing zone, while Sarah provided continuous covering fire. Her rifle cracked repeatedly as she engaged any enemy fighter who attempted to fire on her moving teammates. One of the machine gun teams attempted to reposition for a better angle on the running SEALs. Sarah's shot eliminated the gunner before he could bring his weapon to bear. The assistant gunner tried to take over the weapon, but Sarah's follow-up shot dropped him as well. Enemy fighters were now desperately trying to prevent the SEAL team from reaching the helicopters. Small groups of fighters broke cover and attempted to close distance for more effective fire. Sarah engaged these fighters systematically, dropping them before they could get close enough to threaten her teammates. Her ammunition was running low, but she maintained effective fire throughout the team's movement. The helicopters landed in the designated zone, and Sarah could see her teammates reaching the aircraft. Door gunners on the helicopters began providing suppressive fire to cover the extraction. Morrison's voice came through her earpiece. "Overwatch, time to go." Sarah began her own movement toward the helicopters, engaging targets as opportunities presented themselves. Enemy fire intensified as they realized their primary targets were escaping. Running across the open ground, Sarah could hear bullets passing close to her position. The helicopter door gunners were providing excellent suppressive fire, but individual enemy fighters continued to engage. Reaching the helicopter, Sarah was pulled aboard by her teammates as the aircraft lifted off immediately. Through the open door, she could see enemy fighters emerging from cover to fire at the departing helicopters. The door gunner beside her engaged the enemy fighters with his mounted machine gun, forcing them back into cover as the helicopter gained altitude and speed. Sarah conducted a quick ammunition count and was surprised to find she had fired 37 rounds during the 3-day engagement. Each shot had been carefully planned and executed to achieve maximum tactical effect. As the helicopters flew towards safety, Morrison sat beside Sarah with a grim expression. Intelligence says this was a sophisticated trap designed specifically for our unit. Someone provided detailed information about our capabilities and tactics. Sarah nodded, still processing the intensity of the engagement. The enemy knew exactly how to counter our standard procedures. This was planned by someone with intimate knowledge of SEAL operations. The flight back to base gave the team time to debrief the mission and analyze what had gone wrong with their intelligence. The compound had been a carefully prepared trap, designed to lure a SEAL team into a predetermined kill zone. Thompson had recorded radio intercepts that confirmed the enemy had been expecting them. The level of preparation and coordination suggested state sponsorship rather than typical insurgent operations. Walsh treated minor wounds and exhaustion among the team members while analyzing the enemy tactics they had encountered. The combination of conventional forces with special operations techniques indicated sophisticated training and equipment. Rodriguez examined fragments from enemy equipment he had collected during the engagement. The weapons and communications gear were more advanced than typically encountered in standard Taliban operations. As they approached their base, Sarah reflected on the lessons learned from the engagement. The enemy had adapted quickly to their presence and had demonstrated sophisticated tactical planning. Future missions would need to account for this increased capability. Morrison compiled his after-action report during the flight, documenting the enemy tactics and equipment for intelligence analysis. The mission had been successful in terms of team survival, but the intelligence failure that led to the ambush required immediate investigation. Landing at their forward operating base, the team was debriefed by intelligence officers who were concerned about the sophistication of the enemy operation. Sarah's detailed observations of enemy equipment and tactics provided crucial intelligence for future operations. The medical team conducted thorough examinations of all team members, treating minor injuries and documenting the physical and psychological effects of the extended engagement under siege conditions. Sarah's rifle was examined by the armorer, who was impressed by its performance during the extended engagement. The weapon had functioned flawlessly despite the harsh conditions and intensive use. In her personal debrief, Sarah analyzed her own performance during the engagement. 37 shots fired with 35 confirmed hits represented exceptional accuracy under combat conditions. More importantly, each shot had achieved its tactical objective of supporting team survival and mission completion. The intelligence officers were particularly interested in Sarah's observations about enemy training and coordination. Her detailed analysis of enemy tactics provided valuable insights into the changing nature of the threat they were facing. As the formal debriefings concluded, the team members began processing the personal aspects of their survival. The 3-day siege had tested every aspect of their training and demonstrated the critical importance of individual skills within team operations. Sarah's precision shooting had been the decisive factor in the team's survival, but she recognized that the mission's success had depended equally on the skills and dedication of every team member. The mission became a case study in SEAL training programs, demonstrating how individual excellence within a team framework could overcome seemingly impossible odds. Sarah's shooting performance became legendary within the special operations community, but she remained focused on the continuous improvement that had made that performance possible. The enemy's sophisticated tactics and equipment became the subject of intensive intelligence analysis, leading to changes in operational security procedures and mission planning protocols for future SEAL operations in the region. For Sarah, The mission reinforced the importance of the fundamental skills her father had taught her years earlier. Patience, precision, and the willingness to take responsibility for protecting those who depended on her had proven decisive when everything else had failed. The mountains of Afghanistan had tested every aspect of her training and character, and she had met that test with the quiet professionalism that defined the world's elite warriors.